Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in today. On my last video, a lot of you asked really good questions, and for the purposes of keeping this video short and concise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out 4 of those questions, and I'll try my very best to answer them here. Now, if I don't get to your question, I'm going to try to go through that video again tonight, and I'm going to... Smokes, stop interrupting, what are you doing? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that video and I'll try to respond to all of your questions on that video if I don't get to it in this video today. So let's go ahead and get started. So our first question comes from Sam Hull, and Sam asked, I have a question for your next video. When I got my Quaker parrot, he had his wings clipped, but I've let his flight feathers grow again. But I've noticed that now he isn't stepping up as much and is biting a lot more. I was just wondering if you noticed any similar change when Smokey became flighted again. Alright Sam, that's a great question. And I know that if you look online, a lot of people are going to advise you against keeping your bird flighted, and many resources online really advocate for wing clipping. A lot of these websites will tell you that if you let your bird's wings grow out, they kind of revert to the wild side and become a lot more untamed. What I found is that's very, very untrue. And when Smokey had her flight feathers grow in, really I didn't notice any differences in her personality before her wings grew in and after her wings grew in. What it did do though was before, it took a long time for her flight feathers to grow back, just because when she was clipped, every feather that kind of grew back would kind of break because she's really crazy in the way that she plays, so she would always break them. So it took quite a while. It took, I think, about 1 or 2 years before she was able to get all her flight feathers in for her to fly again. But if your bird is flying away from you and it seems like your bird is becoming more nippy, all that means is you just gotta find a way to try to entice your bird and try to get your bird to see you as the most interesting thing in its environment. If your bird, for example, likes a certain treat like peanuts, use that to try to get your bird to associate that you're the source of all of these good things. They don't always, and they shouldn't be, just treats. When I ask Smokey if she wants a scratch, oftentimes I'll call her over. You want a scratch? Alright, step up and I'll give you a scratch. There you go. What a good bird. So, what I recommend is if your bird seems to be more nippy, it's not because the wings are growing out. Just find a way to get your bird to want to come to you by reinforcing that behavior. You saw that I picked Smokey up and I gave her a scratch. If your bird likes to go somewhere, for example, they have a favorite place in the house that they like to get to, always ask your bird to step up before taking them to that favorite place. My next question comes from Zanzas44. The question was, my bird never tries to put pressure on my fingers, unless he is afraid of some people and want me to change the place. Parentheses, I ignore and I don't change the place. Or when it's bedtime and he gets moody. Does it mean that he wants to go back to the cage, like he wants to sleep in there? I would like to point out that you said that your bird kind of gets nippy when people are around because he wants to go to a different place. And you also mentioned that you ignore that. So what I'd like to say is, if your bird, for example, is giving you signs that they are uncomfortable, that they don't want to be there, and you obviously know that your bird wants to be somewhere else, don't ignore that. Just if your bird wants to go back into his or her cage or to a play stand, bring your bird back there. So in the wild, when a bird feels threatened, they always are going to want to flee. So by giving your bird that opportunity, it actually builds up their confidence because they know that they're not always going to be forced to do something they don't want to do. Our next question comes from Matthew Lewin. And Matthew asks, do you ever have Smokey outside in the open as she is fully flighted? And also along those lines, getting her from house to her outdoor aviary. Smokey is flighted. I do not free fly her. I do teach her how to fly indoors. I try to maximize her skill levels indoors so that if she does if by my human error I do make a mistake and she gets outdoors, I maximize the chances of recovery. But I don't take her outside without having her either in some kind of travel cage or on a harness. I know a lot of you who watch my videos, you guys have a bird that's flighted. I'm going to warn you. And you guys are going to get to a point when you're so comfortable that you're going to want to walk your bird back to their cage outside like this. And I'm going to totally warn you, if you do that, you're going to lose your bird. All it takes is something scary. It could be a blimp up in the sky. It could be a loud noise. It could be a bird of prey in the area. And your bird is going to spook and just fly off. So always err on the safe side. It's always better to be safe than to be sorry. Now I admit, sometimes I do get kind of lazy. So there are times when I will literally just pick her up, Smokes, can I get you? And I will carry her outside like this. Now, do keep in mind though that when your bird gets spooked, they're gonna flap really hard and really fast. So I really recommend you guys, if you have a flighted bird, don't take them outside unless you have a harness or you put them in a travel cage. Go ahead, Smokes. Alright, on to our second to last question that I'm going to answer in this video. This question comes from Beckison, and it's a pretty long question, so I'm going to kind of summarize this for you in a couple sentences. So Beckison has a parrotlet that was adopted from a breeder, and from what it sounds like, the parrotlet is really terrified of hands, probably because of something that happened with the breeder or the pet store. If your parrotlet is completely, or if this works with any bird, if your bird is terrified of hands, find out what your bird's favorite treat is. For a parrotlet, it probably would be millet, so I would withhold the millet from your bird's sole diet. And now, of course, don't starve your bird. Give them pellets. Give them something as a base diet, but take away their favorite treats. Start outside of the cage first. So if your bird is inside the cage, start feeding them millet. And the millet is pretty long, so hold that long string of millet and stick it inside the cage bar so your bird can approach the millet and still be at a great distance from you. This gets your bird used to just approaching you in the first place. Eventually, what you want to do is you want to trim down that millet so it gets shorter and shorter every time until you can get to the point where your bird can get the millet when it's only in between your fingers. At that point, you can then open up the cage door and start working inside of the cage. Now, if your bird is terrified of hands, never try to pull your bird out of the cage. Don't try to reach in and grab them and force them to overcome that fear by flooding them. That's going to completely ruin the trust that you've worked so long to work towards. Alright, and on to the last question for today. This question comes from Little Kitties 87, and the question is, how has being a bird owner influenced your teaching philosophies? Do you think your students have inadvertently benefited from your bird training knowledge? I'm actually really glad you asked that. That's a great question. I mean, I could go on forever talking about and answering this question, but I think to kind of summarize it all, I'm going to tell you a quick and short story. Before I started training birds, when I thought about training an animal or any kind of animal, I thought of abuse. I mean, it had that connotation for me. I don't know if it does with many of you when you first started keeping birds, but when I first heard of training, I thought of circus animals being abused. That was until I started researching more about training. And people hear about, positive reinforcement, and they have this idea that, alright, reinforce behaviors and they occur more likely in the future. Now the hard part is, how are you going to reinforce any behavior if they don't even occur in the first place? So that took me into, shaping behavior and how you shape behaviors. What I found is, and what I love about training birds, is it completely took everything that I thought I knew about training an animal and it flipped it upside down. I've learned that you can I train Smokey to do all of what she does by really establishing a really good communication with her. So let me just kind of mute my phone real quick. So when I started training birds, I learned that you can train your birds to do pretty amazing things without ever having to put a finger on them. I mean, the only time during training when I actually touch Smokey is when I'm reaching over to tell her what a good bird she is. And she's a really good bird. So from that, I started using the same and applying the same principles to train Snuggles. Now, in terms of teaching, this has greatly, I think, impacted my philosophy on teaching. And this is kind of a personal story. When I was in elementary school, I actually did horrible in school. I mean, I could remember when I got even a B-, I'd get really, really excited. And over time, that kind of took a toll on me. Personally, after a while, after so much failure, you kind of get into this mindset of, darn it, can't I ever do anything right? And at times, it may seem, when as a student, kind of reflecting back, I kind of feel like, when you're a kid, adults don't really notice when, kids are doing things that are good. But whenever you do make a mistake, they're all over you for that. After a while, you just feel like giving up. And I feel like this is the case with a lot of young, students, a lot of young kids. So one of the things that I love so much about teaching is that, you get this opportunity to make a positive impact. So as a teacher, what I try to do is I always try to set students up for success by breaking whatever concept it is into very small steps and building it from there so that they're able to make, these small but really important progressions towards achieving a really bigger theme and unit. If that makes any sense at all. Like I said, many of you guys had questions that were unanswered in this video. Go ahead and go back to that previous video where you guys posted your questions, and tonight I'll go on there and I will try my very best to reply to all of you. So again, thank you everybody for your positive feedback, and I will see you all next time.